This is the process shot. I'm Michael. I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen Olivia Rodrigo, Driving Home to You, a newish music documentary from director Stacey Lee. On the documentary side, it walks through the upbringing and rise of the pop music sensation Olivia Rodrigo, and the inspiration and creation behind her debut album, Sour. On the music side, it features new performances from Olivia and her band as they play songs from the album. That's pretty much it. It's one or the other. Probably explains the short run time. From the start, the movie positions itself as a documentary, with a narrative that follows Olivia on a road trip from her home in Utah out to Los Angeles. It tries to stick to this idea, but ends up being more of a visual album for Sour than something more substantial, with the road trip itself just doing more to give the songs a setting and backdrop, rather than letting them tell a personal story. The places we see are interesting, but they aren't ever talked about at all, and so the traveling aspect of the setup feels absent, or at least wasted, as if it was developed for no reason other than to make the performances look pretty or gritty. As for the music performances, they're fine. It's really more about how they're presented here, with each individual song being its own music video. Some incorporating creative twists like a one-shot take, a backing orchestra, or looping audio, but otherwise just being well-produced music videos, rather than something more spontaneous, or at the very least unplugged. It feels more like the filmmakers knew the draw of the movie would be these songs, and so they put their focus on these segments over the documentary bits. In fact, there's a pattern set up pretty quickly, starting with Olivia talking about the writing process of one of her songs, then moving on to a performance of that song, and going back and forth through the whole album. The talks have some interesting information, but rarely does it pertain to anything personal that isn't directly about the next song. It doesn't help either that these segments feature Olivia talking with a bit of a mumble, which is honestly to be expected since she at least seems to be pulling from her personal thoughts, but it's still a bit hard to understand or hear if you aren't completely tuned in. And with how little there is to pay attention towards in the film's visuals in these documentary scenes, it's much easier to tune out instead. There is some archival footage that makes for a nice contrast, both visually and in terms of documentary and information being shared, but it still plays into the songwriting process more than anything about Olivia herself. It all ultimately seems to amount to narration that becomes repetitive, visuals that become uninteresting, a structure that is predictable, a concept that goes by the wayside, and music that's really not all that bad, with performances that are designed to be the highlight. Overall, I feel that with the weak structure and weaker substance of the film, it feels like a waste of a good idea. If they had stuck with the central concept of a road trip through personal history and inspiration, it might have had more staying power. But instead, as it is, the movie is pretty much a visual album with liner notes. Olivia Rodrigo, Driving Home to You. Stacey Lee, 2022. 2 stars. I wouldn't recommend watching the movie unless you're a fan of Olivia and her music. And even then, you'd probably do better to skip all the documentary scenes and go straight to the songs. That's it for me. If you like this review, leave a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. A musical road trip does sound like a good idea, if you can pull it off right. Maybe these guys can go back out and try it again one day, and actually focus on the road this time.